I'm Madhu Sharma and this is Design Mind. Every episode, we teach your mind about design by analysing a website. In this episode of Design Mind, we are looking at Huge Inc., which is a global design agency. You may have heard of the principle show don't tell, which states that it is better for a company to demonstrate its skills rather than listing them. The benefits of this should be obvious, as anybody can say that they are great, so demonstrating greatness will leave a lasting impact on the audience. As we will see, show don't tell is something that Huge does wonderfully. Let's start by looking at the homepage, which is a magnificent example of simplicity. An isolated image is placed on a bold coloured background. Immediately, we can see the show don't tell ethos at work. There's no selling text. Of course, Huge doesn't need to sell itself, as prospective clients will know the agency must be good to have high caliber clients such as TED and Audi and the Super Bowl. One really clever touch is that as you flick between the screen, you can see that the objects are arranged in the letter H. The benefit of stripping the page down to simple elements makes it stand out with dramatic impact. If we look at this pager on the right hand side, we can see that it also continues the simplicity. The space around it makes it stand out despite its small size, so the user will instinctively recognise it and know that they have to click on it. Clicking this last pink button scrolls the user to the next section. Once this happens, the slideshow we saw earlier is no longer accessible and the user must refresh the page to see it again. I'm in two minds about this. On one hand, hiding the earlier content keeps the page clutter-free. However, not being able to scroll back is disorientating. If we refresh the page and go back to the older section, we will see that, as noted earlier, the last button is in pink. When I first came to the site, I immediately clicked on it to see why it was a different colour. I was then disappointed that I couldn't scroll back, as when I first came to the site I hadn't clicked on the other buttons and so hadn't seen those slides. On the web, people usually look at sections out of order, so hiding sections in this way can be a usability issue. Let's look at this next section more closely. This section has a brilliant hierarchy, with this headline text being marked out by having this bright magenta background. However, the headline text is a bit confusing, as it references the day of the week, which seems to be an odd thing to highlight so prominently. I suppose the headline does add some personality to the site, giving it a sense of character. Underneath is the grid of Huge's work. It again follows the show don't tell approach by interspersing company logos such as this MTV one with research reports and news about awards the company has won. It leads the user to form the conclusion that Huge's design work is thoroughly supported by research, and this research clearly works, otherwise they wouldn't win awards and attract prestigious clients. If you look very carefully, you can see that the report tiles are taller than the rest, which subtly indicates the priority Huge places on research. One interesting feature of the grid is that it isn't filled with famous logos. In fact, there's really only this MTV one. The other famous brands, such as Marvel, which is down here, are set in regular text. This might seem like an odd choice, as famous logos stand out and can be instantly spotted. On the other hand, because the grid isn't pushing logos in the user's face, when the user spots them, it has more of an impact. It also makes Huge seem more confident and powerful, as it doesn't need to boast about the clients it has. This in turn makes Huge seem like a famous brand in its own right. Moving down the page, we come to this world clock which shows the time in various countries. This clock instantly communicates that Huge is an international agency. When I first saw this, I didn't realise that the clocks were actually links and so glossed over them. It's only when viewing the page a second time did I click on a link by chance. Clicking the link takes the user to this profile page that provides contact information for the agency based in that country, together with a sample of their work. Given that a prospective client will probably need to access these pages in order to contact their nearest Huge agency, displaying the links as clocks is a bad idea, as they are just too easy to gloss over. The rest of the page does such a positive job of showing and not telling about Huge's skills that the overly vague nature of the clack section damages the positivity that's created elsewhere. Worse still, if I'm on an agency page and then click the back button to go back to the clack section, the page becomes broken as it gets stuck on this grid and I'm not able to scroll, making the site inaccessible. The only way to continue is to refresh the page, and sometimes that doesn't even work, which forces the user to close and reopen the browser. This creates a bad impression and leaves me feeling that Huge perhaps spends too much effort on data analysis, that it overlooks the basics. As you can see here, I've refreshed the page, but I still can't access the site, as scrolling is impossible. To be fair, when the user is on an agency page, if they click this Huge button, they can return to the main site without breaking things. But then they have to skip past this opening slideshow, which disrupts the browsing experience. Moving on to the footer, we see the tagline of "Make something you love." As it is trademarked, the user can indirectly tell that Huge takes branding seriously. Clicking on the tagline takes the user to this case study page, which explains how the logo was created to reflect the company's ethos of less is more. This page breaks from the show don't tell approach, as now Huge are directly telling us about their unique features, and so it's a bit jarring compared to the subtlety of the rest of the site. However, the case study is a great way to demonstrate the care and attention Huge takes with each project. Let's now look at some of the other case study and research reports that are linked to on the main grid. Each case study and report follows the style of the home page, using bold headings that stand out due to the use of white space. Scroll down and the text is laid out like a magazine article, with beautiful typography and images and pull quotes interspersed with the text. On the right side there's the author byline and photo. Including author photos is always a good idea, as it makes it easier for the audience to relate to the writer. This share button is a nice touch. Many sites tend to overload their pages with sharing links, but Huge cleverly hides them in this menu, giving the user all the convenience of sharing, but without the clutter of having all those widgets and buttons. At the bottom of the page are links to other articles. However, I'm not a fan of this "read this" headline. It doesn't add anything and it sounds too commanding. Let's move on to analysing the navigation. Like a lot of sites these days, Huge uses mobile style navigation. In Design Mind episode 7, I discussed some of the drawbacks of doing this on a desktop. Namely that hiding the navigation behind a menu creates extra work for the user, as they first have to click on the menu button and then select the link they want, instead of being able to select the link directly. I think the Huge menu has the added problem of not clearly communicating which sections the user has already visited, so it's quite easy for the user to accidentally visit the same section multiple times, creating frustration. Plus, having the links this big on desktop just looks silly. When scrolling down the page, the navigation area disappears, and the user has to scroll back up to the top of the page to access it again. This is probably a good idea, as having the navigation intersecting over the grid of links would be confusing. Unfortunately, as we can see here, sometimes scrolling back to the top doesn't make the navigation reappear. This is not only disorientating because the user can't access the links they want, it also makes the site feel as it hasn't been properly bug checked, which harms the professional image of the agency. I now want to move on to discuss two more user interface devices that Huge frequently uses on its pages. The first is this pager that usually appears at the start of most pages. It functions to break up information into easy-to-glance slides. While it is a good way of streamlining the page, it does require the user to do a lot of clicking to access content, which can be off-putting. Another common user interface device is this arrow, which tells the user to scroll down the page. It is also used on the front page, and it works well there because the user might not realise that there's more content under the opening slides. However, I don't understand the use of an arrow here, where it's obvious that the user can scroll down. As we saw earlier, the navigation on the Huge site disappears when the user is looking at content, which suggests that the site is not aimed at tech novices. However, the use of this arrow goes against this audience, as the arrow is something that would be associated with an audience that is new to using the web. This indirectly suggests that Huge isn't clear on who its audience is. Let's finish by examining the mobile functionality of the site. Huge's clean, simple design works okay on tablets and larger size mobiles. However, on a mobile device such as the iPhone, the text nearly triples in size, which is an odd choice as it creates lots of unnecessary scrolling. Other than that, the mobile version of the site is pretty good. Overall, Huge does an excellent job of demonstrating the power of simplicity and how using a show but don't tell approach can create a dramatic effect. However, it also demonstrates the importance of testing, as the site does have several glitches, and although they are minor, they do work against the positivity that the rest of the site establishes. That's it for this episode of Design Mind. A new episode of Design Mind is released every Monday and Thursday. Find us on the web at designmind.info. Our YouTube channel is at youtube.com/designmindinfo. You can also find us on iTunes. We'd love it if you could leave us a review at any of these places. Until next time, happy designing!